Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Killer!
Hello and welcome back to an instant reaction edition of the Tip Sheet podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me in the wake of the round 24 loss to the Sydney Roosters is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella, Eels went down 38-14 in a game that we both tipped a pretty similar result to this outcome. But the journey there was interesting. Probably not the one that we anticipated. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty, as always, a quick check-in on how you're doing, mate. The temporary but heavy downpour influencing both this game and the one before it between Manly and the Warriors. And I got to say, it's not a good look for Allianz Stadium with its complete, seemingly lack of drainage facilities.
I'm still stunned by the condition that ground was in, because you can expect on any ground with the amount of rain that fell that you'd get some surface water immediately after, but with modern drainage systems,
it just didn't move in like 1 mil. And you know, there's always been the historical memes about the bog at Brookvale, but they recently got their own upgrade, which was considerably less than that of Allianz, and they got torrential downpours throughout the entire game, whereas the Allianz downpour was only for 10-20 minutes. And the stark difference between the two grounds, wow.
How was the rainfall where you live, mate?
I think we got pretty similar to what happened at Allianz, because we're in a west here, and it was 10 to 20 minutes of intense downfall, and then just it stopped.
Well, bone dry here.
So there you go.
Hills.
Yeah, so not
Bone
a west
dry.
of Sydney problem. It's inner west to eastern suburbs problem.
Oh, look, you could see it when I looked out at the horizon later in the afternoon. You could see a whole lot of cloud that was building to the southwest, and it looked like storm clouds gathering. But it just went around. It just stayed sort of a bit south of the Hills district, and you know, as it got around that time of the Seagulls clash, I could see in the distance the lightning, and you could smell the rain in the air, but it just didn't hit here.
Yep.
So obviously, if this match had been played at Parramatta, I don't think there was any rain that hit around Parramatta. I could be wrong, because I'm not far from Parramatta. But yeah, the conditions that they played in there tonight were just, I mean, they were ridiculous. Let's face it, they were ridiculous. And there was some wet weather tries and definitely wet weather moments, but it was the result that we expected, unfortunately.
Yep.
And that wasn't taken away from us, not expecting Parramatta to have a crack. But as we pointed out in the preview podcast, there was a massive difference in class. You had an Eels team that was coming from the heartache of last week's loss. They were hurting. You knew they were hurting when Barrett gave them some days off that they would have normally trained on this week. They did their review on Monday and didn't train again until the captain's run. And that was it. That was the prep for this week. And that was a headspace issue with the training. And I wouldn't have disagreed with it. The captain's run was, look, it seemed that their heads were in the right place, but it was, we'd said in the preview podcast, this is just going to be a bit too hard a task for them.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge was going to be well beyond them, and the rain. I never believed that the rain was an equaliser in these sorts of conditions. In fact, quite the opposite, because I thought in this instance, the class factor's going to get them through. And you've got a couple of halves at the Roosters who, if nothing else, have really clever kicking games. And it was just always going to be difficult. The Roosters didn't start off the best, and ideally the Eels would have been able to take advantage of that, but that never happened. But
I think if
anyway,
Guffo...
before we get too deep into this, John, let's
Yeah.
do our thanks to our sponsor, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. They're sticking solid with us and the Eels in what's a really tough season. And if you, whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, give us a subscribe, a like, drop in a comment. But especially if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to us on YouTube, it really does help the algorithm, and it gets the podcast out in front of more eyes as suggested viewing. So we'd really appreciate that if you did that. But John, I mean, I'm going to warn people, this isn't going to be a very long podcast. I don't think there's too much that we need to say because, as I said, it was expected. What's the key stats for you?
Well, I mean, the usual rundown will reveal pretty much what we'd expect. Roosters dominating all the key attacking stats. I think everything's in bold on their side. Run meters, runs, post-contact, line breaks, 10-6, tackle breaks, 57-38, average set distance. No surprise there. They had a little bit more ball, 52-48%. Eels did complete more effectively, though. One percentile point better, 77-76%. Eels are 31 of their 40 sets. Roosters 32 or 42, which is honestly good completion rates considering the conditions. So I do have to say. The most telling stat, I think, for both teams, perhaps low watermarks for the season in terms of effective tackle rates on both sides. Eels, obviously, not good. 79.67%, so sub 80 there. 57 missed tackles, 18 ineffective. Not metrics that you'd be wanting in any game, even with wet conditions. But on the flip side, the Roosters only 82.85% effective tackle rate, 38 missed tackles, 21 ineffective of their own. So I think both coaches would be a little bit upset, and I use little very non-operatively there, that the defense was not up to par on both sides. So the other key stats, penalties end up being equal. I think a late run of penalties, the Eels helping in that regard there, although ruck infringements did favour the Roosters slightly, and both teams having players in the bin, although it was a singular player for the Roosters and 2 for the Eels. And we will talk about one of those bins because while I think that I completely agree with the Wiremu Greg submitting, that was just a really stupid play that deserved to be a sin bin every day of the week. I'm a little bit lost as to what happened with Brendan Hands.
Yeah, that was, it was, I was going to say pedantic. I mean, Atkins can be a real...
If that's not just a penalty but a sin bin, the Roosters could have had 2 or 3 players in the bin before half-time when we had that unexpected run of possession due to some Roosters errors on their goal line. They were giving away 6 against every second tackle. I just do not understand the logic behind Brendan Hands getting sin binned for the first infringement on the goal line when Brendan Smith, wasn't even fighting hard to get up and play the ball. Like, it was barely even a 6 again, let alone a sin bin.
Well, look, he was Brandon
Smith and Brendan Hands. Don't worry, I just went there.
Brandon Smith, look, he was throwing his arms around a bit, and then he was, I think it looked like, and I'm only going off the first viewing of it, but it looked like after Brendan Hands got up to take the marker position that Brandon Smith was putting his hands onto Dylan Brown.
You're not helping.
To keep him on the ground, but for mine it was a ridiculous call, and look, I mean, it just seemed to fit in with the pattern of what's been happening in refereeing lately. I can't work out what's going on.
Hey, we did see a circuit breaker. There was an obstruction penalty. Hey, we got one.
Well,
Dejan Arce got shot by a sniper in the ground to sell it, but we got one. So, well done. Take the little wins, guys.
You know what? I mean, I can't see how the ref last week missed what happened live. And I mean, we're going crook about the bunker, but to me, it was at least Grant Atkins made that call because it was a blatant obstruction that happened there. But what about earlier tonight?
Massive incorrect play of the ball in the lead up to a try that was missed. Everyone on the ground, everyone watching at home saw it, except for the officials. Yeah.
Look, it's what I'm coming to expect lately. But anyway, back onto this match because we could be spending 4 or 5 podcasts talking about some of the horrors that we've seen this year.
And look, mate, you challenged me off the record to try and find a reactionary clip that sums up our feelings on the state of officialdom in the NRL, and I think I have something that kind of covers the bases, so let's go with this one.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Yes, indeed. The NRL does feel like Billy Madison just a wee bit right now with how inconsistent the officiating is, and I think that'll probably be a nice place to sum up our feelings on where things are right now.
John, would it have been more appropriate to have played that after the Monday afternoon briefing?
I'm gonna have to find something for the Tuesday podcast because you know that there's going to be some hot garbage coming out of the Monday morning or Monday afternoon debrief. So yeah, let's keep our ears to the ground on that one because I really look forward to seeing what the latest will be to defend the officials right now.
So for mine, mate, massive difference in class tonight.
Yeah, golf.
The defensive frailties out wide for the Eels. It almost looked like when the Roosters were going wide, they were toying with us.
And that's not a wet condition thing, is it, 60s? We saw it last week against Penrith where same problems reared its head, in the big moments there with our left edge just getting eviscerated in regulation, offensive, defensive situations. So, look, both Talangi and Penasini, their defensive stats are not good reading. We were talking about it before we went online, but Will Penasini, 8 tackles made, 5 missed, 1 ineffective. Blaze Talangi, 14 tackles made, 9 missed, 1 ineffective. So the tackle efficiency rates there, abysmal, obviously. And it wasn't even that. It wasn't even like making or missing a tackle. The amount of times, and obviously it's reflected in their missed tackle stats, but just in terms of the pure eye test, the amount of times they would go up and be in a position to make a good tackle, like they actually made a decent read, but then just lose control of the tackle and get bounced off. And it would start a chain of offloading or second phase football for the Roosters as they pivoted back inside, redirected, and would find, the ruck defense of the Eels flagging a little bit and creating offloads and opportunities for James Tedesco, to, try and punch through the guts. So it was really nasty because it started a sort of cascade, a downward spiral of, culminating or compounding defensive issues.
Yeah, and look, there could be an argument made that they were able to throw better numbers because some of those moments happened during the sin bin period, but it looked like the Eels had pretty much numbered up not too badly in those situations. It was missed tackles that, or a poor read that was just, when I say a poor read, it was the way Will Penasini and Sean Russell got bamboozled with the try that was scored by Tedesco. Just the way the play, I mean, it almost looked like neither of them really knew who they were supposed to tackle in that moment. And maybe it should be some credit that's given to the Roosters for that particular one. But yeah, as I said, it was a golf in class tonight.
God, that Tedesco try was bad mechanically from both them and Gufferson too. It was just that is like teaching tape for how not to handle a block play down the short side.
Yeah, but as I said, you got a major class difference. You got, which basically comes about from one team being at close to full strength, and the other team being what we are this year. With we may have we may have had Kilmer come back and
Hey, the
Sivo.
little blessing there. I thought Kelmer looked good. He looked like he was resuming play from where he'd left off with that injury/suspension.
Yeah, and I want to get to talking about some of the positives that were there. And we got Sivo back for half a game tonight, and
good try saver.
It was actually a try saver that maybe reminded James Tedesco that Sivo has annoyed him slightly on a couple of occasions.
Probably one of the more kinder lessons he's gotten from Micah Sivo in terms of football. Not really sure what the plan was to have a specialist winger play a specialist wing role off the interchange. Feels like a little bit of a squandered. I know it's a great play for Micah Sivo there, but it feels like a bit of a squandered rotational ploy there. But,
well, as a I mean, we knew what was going to happen. It was always going to be that Sivo was going to get a game this week, and Barrett confirmed that in the
coach's presser,
the coach's presser that was recorded on the day of the captain's run on Thursday. So it was no real shock. I guess people were thinking that maybe it was a case of Tungor drops out and Sivo goes to the wing, but that wasn't how they prepared. So, they prepared for both of them to play. So it was an interesting selection to have him there on the bench. And you know what? I look at what Shawnee Russell looked like tonight with the strapping that was all over his knee. And by knee, I mean from the thigh almost down to the ankle in terms of the strapping that was there. He was just taped up like you wouldn't believe. There was a couple of times there where he was running where I thought he's really hobbled. He's...
Oh, yeah, it's not... I mean, I don't know if it's like Bailey in the sense that it's a partially torn ACL, but he's similar to Bailey in the sense that he is pushing through with a knee that is clearly not 100%.
Yeah, so looking at that, I have to wonder whether, when we get to next week, whether he's rested. And with Sivo back...
Tungor and Sivo can play wing, yeah.
Yeah, because, why the season's over as such. I know that there's the battle to avoid the wooden spoon and what have you, but if you've got a fella out there who is going through that sort of difficulty...
Yeah, and you're risking potential long-term injury heading into another season where, again, it's not looking like the roster issues improved that much. In terms of the outside backs, you need these guys fit for next year.
Yeah, look, I don't want to see Sean struggle like that. And that play where you had Tupou score and Tupou just glided past Sean like he wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And I know that he was in an advantageous position on receiving the ball compared to Sean, but it was just, I mean, it looked like a fellow who is in good shape being able to run past someone who's clearly hampered by injury. Mm-hmm. And, if we can avoid that, I don't know whether there's any risk for Sean to have further injury. And maybe that's the decision that's been made. He's not going to damage it any further. We can tape him up and he'll be fine. Well, not be fine, but he'll get through. I'd still say, look, even though we're struggling for numbers, if we've got two wingers that we can put on there, don't put him through that. Don't put him through that. Let him freshen up, get better, be able to come into the preseason. That's if Sean's gonna. I'm assuming Sean's going to be with us next year.
It feels like everyone's like subject to notice at this point, isn't it? As the Eels try and get a fresh grip on the salary cap and top 30 for next year. So maybe there is some water to go under those bridges there.
Well, at one stage I was thinking, well, the only players that aren't likely to be tapped on the shoulder is Moses, Brown and Gutherson. But then we got journos suggesting that Gutherson might be getting a tap on the shoulder or being allowed to go to the Dragons. I don't think that's going to happen, people. I'm just saying, that's... we just don't know who the Eels might be prepared to move on under the circumstances that they're in. But yeah, I wouldn't think that Gutho's going to be one of those people. I think he's going to be the sort of person I think that will know when it's time for him to not be able to contribute, and I can't see that he's going to want to contribute to anyone else really, but Parramatta. He did have a nice little bit of fun before the game, suggesting that their job was pretty tough with Mitch Moses in his Roosters gear. A little dig there at the media rumours about Moses heading off to the Tricolours. But yeah, look, I mean, there's not really too much we can say because we can talk about, the trouble with a lot of our errors is that we struggle to defend them, and that was the case tonight. Don't get me wrong, there were times where they turned up, and I honestly didn't think they had it in them to turn up under difficult circumstances. And I'm talking about some of those situations on the line.
They spent 20. I know that the Roosters obviously had Nafau White get bin later, but when the Roosters had all the running, they had 20 minutes playing with a man up there, and they still couldn't sniff 50. So while they did score some easy tries, there was surprisingly a bit of desperation there, wasn't there, 60? So,
look, again, I can't fault the effort. I can maybe fault, some times where the footy smarts wasn't quite there, and certainly a kick out on the full off a kick-off.
We were flirting with that all night as well. We've gotten very close a number of times.
So there were times like that. There were times where the execution was just awful. There were times where it was like the players weren't concentrating. But if you're just talking about pure effort and trying hard, look, I'd suggest that at least 13 of the players gave it their absolute everything. And even then, if I'm saying that there were some that maybe didn't, I'm suggesting that there were moments when they didn't. And I guess that maybe that just comes down to whether they can concentrate or not for the full 80. You have to think there's got to be some players there that just want the season to be over.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, goodness knows there's supporters that want the season to be over already.
It's usually a good yardstick or measuring stick, isn't it?
Yeah, but the fact that they were so outgunned that they were struggling to effectively compete and stay with the Roosters, the fact that they didn't throw in the towel, and I mean, people might be saying, well, geez, what are you saying? How can you be grateful for that? Well, look, I think under the circumstances of the season and the team that we're running out at the moment, and that's with respect to the players that are out there, but the bottom line is that if the injury toll wasn't there, it would be a somewhat different lineup of players that would be taking the field. So, in all the circumstances that are there, I'm not going to complain in any way about the effort that's going into it. So, yeah. So let's find some specific praise, mate, because I think it's one of those games where it's not like the loss that we had to the Dolphins earlier this year, where the Dolphins put the cleaners through us, and it was a Dolphins reserve grade team.
Yes, they were well shortened troops up coming into that Darwin match. So, yeah, it's the inverse here. Obviously, Roosters getting back to full strength, Eels well under full strength. At least we didn't have to hear anything from the commentary about how unlucky the Roosters were to have, 2 or 3 players out this week as opposed to last week. But look, there were some genuine positives from this one. We mentioned earlier Kelma Tuolangi coming back from essentially a 2-month stint on the sidelines where he busted that thumb against the Seagulls, I believe it was. Or was it the Roosters? Regardless, he broke his thumb. He's come back, playing the same kind of physically dominant football that he was really starting to lean into prior to that, time off. I thought it was very good tonight. Ran a great line to score a try. Had a number of. It was a blend of raw power through contact and some surprisingly good footwork with that ability to spin off his left foot and beat a defender that way. So I love the little mix up there, especially in the wet weather. Alongside Oath and Gahi, I thought those two brought a bit of sting to defense as well. They were looking to go out there and try and lay the wood a bit, which is good. William McGregor tried to as well, but he did it very poorly to the point that he got sin-binned and also missed out on a loose ball because he wanted to smash a Rooster. But I thought that Joe and Kelmer were very good. Who else? Dillbag's no surprises there. He saved a try with an effort from the other side of the field to scoop up a kick that led to a spectacular explosion of water. I think they're probably my three best on the ground. Guffo had a very poor start, but he rallied and did some nice stuff at the end. But I think if he could have his time back, he'd probably tuck the ball and run during that little bit of bonus possession we had at the start of the game, because I think he probably scores a try instead of passing to Tungo in that situation. But he could have easily have just played poorly from the rest of the game onwards there. But I thought he did rally a bit. But the guys that really stood out to me, Dillbags and then the two forwards there, Joffa and Kelmer.
Look, I can't disagree with the two forwards that you're talking about, because I thought they were head and shoulders the best out there. I think we missed the work rate of Ryan Madison.
Oh, big time. Big time. Actually, I do also want to shout out Dejan, who I thought on a left edge that was pretty leaky. I thought he wasn't the issue. Had some nice kicks, except for the kick out in the four. That was silly. But yeah, we definitely missed Madison tonight. I've spoken about it in recent podcasts, but he does a lot of the dirty work that between, the back three that we don't have compared to like the Panthers, and then the other middle forwards aren't firing at the moment. It doesn't get looked upon favourably because it's not pretty meters, but he does a lot of that ugly work and lays the table for other guys to have better runs.
I think the problem for Ryan Madison, because he's been spoken about as being a player that has been told that they can negotiate with other clubs. The biggest problem for him is that he's on a big salary, and there's a little bit of negative perception around him, especially from the previous year where he opted to take the suspension rather than the fine, and people have still been dirty on that. But I think in terms of the type of player, if we're going to play a different brand of football where we're looking for greater mobility in the forwards, he's actually a bigger forward with mobility.
Yes.
And capable of that high work rate. But as I said, I think the issue is more that he's on a significant salary. He's one of a number of forwards that are on significant salaries. They have to release forwards on significant salaries to be able to get some salary cap relief, to be able to go out into the player market and change up the mix in the team. And the Eels need a little bit more mobile forwards. They need pace in the back line. They need depth in the spine. They need depth in the back line, to be truthful. Never mind just pace. But they can't do that unless they're able to create that cap space to go out and get into the player market. And the only way they can get that sort of salary cap relief from players is by releasing players who are going to be in some demand by other clubs. And that's where we've had the situation with Reg being offered. I think the Eels have made the decision they're not going to keep both props who are on extremely good salaries, that one of them's going to have to go. Reg could probably attract offers that are around the money that he's on at the moment, and that's where we are with him. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Matto. I think we missed him tonight, but those two that you identified in Offengawi, who his work rate was just great, and Kelmer in first game back, he threatened pretty much with every carry that he made. And apart from that, look, see, Dejan played was quite solid at halfback. And basically what that means is you're getting the percentage of involvement with Dejan and Dylan that you might get with Mitch Moses and Dylan.
Yeah, and it's
playing a secondary role.
It's an interesting case study, isn't it? Where although he's still the primary ball handler, less has been more for Dejan, and you get the feeling that if the rest of the team was both healthy and in form and playing good football, that what he's doing now would be more than enough to be carrying the Eels towards a winning record.
Yeah, but in situations like we have at the moment, look, I probably would have like just a little bit more of the ball in Dylan's hands.
Mm-hmm.
So because he's a good runner. Dylan's an excellent runner of the football, if nothing else. And in the few occasions tonight that he tucked the ball under the arm and took a run, he was getting good meters.
Yeah, he was either threatening the half break again or was just driving even forwards back through contact. Yeah.
Now, we want to talk about some mixed performances. Will at the end was starting to look like the Will that we know, but prior to that, he ended up with really good run meters. And you look at the stats on that side of it, the carrying the football, and you go, well, that's an outstanding contribution from him. But defensively,
it's not about effort for Will. He is definitely putting in, but his execution has been subpar, especially defensively.
So,
but even offensively, there was a try. I assume it was going to be a try because I think when you got the rear angle, it looked like Sam Walker would have had a chance to maybe cut off Sean Russell, but that pass was terrible, the forward pass to Russell. So, yes, not a matter of effort, but a matter of application and just technical details for Will.
Yeah, and the same thing's basically happening for him with defence because he's coming in for a big collision and then it's like bouncing off because the stick isn't happening. Like there is something technically going wrong with his tackle where he's coming in for the collision and then it's not like he's being beaten. It's like the impact of the collision has him bouncing off because he's not timing the wrap of his arms around the ball runner.
Yes, he's putting himself in position to affect the tackle, but then not sinking the actual, jam in with the wrap.
That's it. So, very much we're talking about some technical issues for him rather than effort. We're certainly not. There's never been a question of talent with Will, but there's just some ordinary moments, and I guess that fits in with the Eels this season because how often are we saying that, especially lately, well, we can't question the effort, but the execution, leaves a bit to be desired. And, I guess if we're talking about that as the team, we can talk about that with individual performances as well. So, let's just get back to those positives. So we'll talk about the positives of Offengawi. We'll talk about the positives of Kelmer Tuolungi, and I guess we have to talk about the positives of Dylan Brown. I'm not. Look, it was a rough start from Gutho, but man, if he's not out there.
Oh look, Gutho's got the runs on the board to get away with half a bad game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, I think,
like I said, the only thing that did surprise me was he didn't get put to the bin for his running spar with Atkins because he was obviously very frustrated throughout that one. So well done to Gutho, I guess, for not making it 3 sin bins or maybe 2 sin bins and a send-off for the Parramatta Eels tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So, look, I think that just about wraps it up. Maybe if I was doing the 3-2-1, and we didn't actually define 3-2-1. We both named the same three players, so we'll just say they're our 3-2-1s. You can work out whatever order you want to put them in, people. And I'd like to give some points to the Eels supporters that got down there to the stadium tonight, because they're in what was awful conditions down there at the start of the game. They're travelling down to the city to get behind the team in what is a horrid season. So those people, they're not just turning up for home games, they're getting it to the away games. Shout out to them. Thank you to them. Thanks. I guess I'm saying almost like thanks on behalf of the club, like we're part of the club, but they do deserve the thanks for that. Thank you to everyone for listening tonight. We really appreciate you continuing to stay with the Cumberland Throw and the Tip Sheet podcast, this instant reaction. Thank you to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rellan and Parramatta. Again, also, loyal support for us, loyal support for the Parramatta Eels there from Greg and his team. And, John, thank you for another fine podcast that you've been able to provide here. I always, being able to talk footy with you, mate, it's a privilege for me. And, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.